Hi, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 10 of our voyage through Western music history. Today is our Opera Day 2, in which we will discuss Italian opera in the second half of the 19th century. The next class will be Opera Day 3, which is unfortunately also our last Opera Day for this semester, in which we're discussing mainly the music of Richard Wagner and his impact on the rest of music history. So we find ourselves in the 19th century, and we begin about during Beethoven's time. Now, we know that Beethoven already was quite famous and quite popular, at least in the second and third thirds of his life, and quite a superstar, not only in Vienna but also beyond. But there was another composer at the same time who was probably just as, if not even, no, I actually want to say much more popular and famous throughout Europe, and that was Gioacchino Rossini. Now, we talked about Biedermeier culture in the 19th century and the ever ongoing rise of the middle class and this distinct interest in musical culture in the middle class. And that, of course, also, as you can imagine, propelled the development of opera houses. New opera theaters are being erected all over Western Europe, typically for the first time. Remember, in the 18th century, it was more of a opera was more of a court entertainment, and therefore for the elite. Now we see the rise more and more of opera theaters that are run for profit by so-called impresarios. Do you want to know how you spell that? I guess you do. Let me spell it for you. Here is an impresario. This is someone who runs an opera company. These theaters are typically subsidized by the government, but also by private sponsors, and the performances are attended mainly by the upper class and by the middle class. Now, just like, remember when we talked about the ongoings during the Congress of Vienna 1814, 1815, the press begins to really participate very vividly in cultural ongoings of a city. So newspapers will advertise new opera performances, and premiers will publish substantive articles about upcoming performances and what to expect, and will also publish reviews after the fact. But beyond just the regular opera craze at the theater, you can also, as member of the middle class, go to a music store only days after a premiere and buy the most important excerpts in piano arrangements that, remember, Biedermeier culture, pianos in the salon. And so Gretchen Miller, if you will, can go buy the latest arias from newly performed operas and play them for other amateur audiences in the salon of the middle class. The style of these of this new operatic style, that's really I don't even want to compare it with boy groups. It was an undescribable phenomenon in all over Europe, the hype around opera. And that is connected to the invention and development of a new operatic style that's called bel canto. This is how you spell that, or actually lowercase. Now, bello in Italian means beautiful, and canto is singing, okay? And it describes really well a major aspect of this style, namely that the focus lies really on the vocal performance, and you might even call it vocal acrobatics, and is along with what we saw in with the developments in instrumental music, think Liszt, Paganini, really difficult writing styles for these instruments. The bel canto style is in many ways the vocal pendant to the virtuosity that's going on the instruments. Therefore, opera singers are absolute superstars, and are expected to be given ample musical possibilities within the opera to show off their talent, their prowess, their virtuosity, and their amazing skill. On the one hand, with improvisation of ornaments and cadenzas. On the other hand, just pure vocal breathtaking technique, particularly, of course, by means of coloratura. Remember, this is how you spell it, coloratura. It's a virtuosic melismas for vocal writing. We're going to see a few examples for that in a moment. Just like singers, also composers become superstars, and we're looking at one particular example that probably even overshadowed Beethoven in terms of popularity at the time. And I suppose, hold on, let me correct the slide here. I don't think we need this, actually. No, actually we don't. That overshadowed, much to his disliking, of course, Beethoven quite a bit, and that is Rossini. Rossini, here is a picture of the fellow. Rossini was born in Pesaro in Italy in 1792. So he is about, let's say, contemporary of Schubert for sure, and a little younger than Beethoven. And he lived quite long. He died in 1868. He's got a very funny biography in that in the first half of his life, basically, he was an incredibly popular opera composer. In the second half of his life, he retired and enjoyed mainly cooking and became a gourmet chef. Rossini got his first opera commission in 1810, still being active in Italy. In 1815, he became musical director of the Teatro San Carlo in Naples, and from there he composed very rapidly. He was known to be talented with being able to write quickly and produce lots of operas in a short amount of time. His major works include 39 operas. Today, he's best known for his comic operas, so in the genre of the so-called opera buffa. But he also did compose opera series as well. But if you have done the reading in the textbook, which I hope, if you haven't, please do it now, then you know that one of his most famous operas is kind of a continuation of Mozart's Figaro, and is entitled Il Barbiere di Sevilla, or The Barber of Seville. Rossini is one of the first big names of the bel canto style. As I said earlier, main aspects of this style, operatic singing style, is elegant, effortless technique, agility, flexibility, and control of the voice. Long lyrical lines are typical for this style, florid embellishments, and many of these being improvised. So as an audience, when you were listening to a bel canto singer, you could expect that he or she was going to embellish their lines with even more acrobatics that are not in the score, but that are improvised. The term, by the way, bel canto, is being used in retrospect as so often. We've talked about that before, that Rossini didn't know that he was a bel canto composer. The term was invented only quite a bit later. The music, since it's all about the vocal display of virtuosity, the orchestra plays very often a secondary role. This is kind of the time when lots of the typical opera music sounds like in the orchestra. Over which a singer can do their vocal jumping around, and we'll see an example in a moment. The music focuses on really catchy melodies, on snappy rhythms, on clear phrases. In other words, on melodies that people can take home with them and will whistle in the streets for days and weeks after the performances. The vocal style uses lots of coloratura, tries to establish really strong expressivity, and wants to depict, just like in the vein that we've seen with Mozart with the vocal line, also the character of the opera. Typically, the harmonic schemes are not very complex. That's also typical for this style of many of Beethoven's contemporaries. But the focus is really on the virtuosity. Now, remember the most vital component parts of opera, both buffa and seria, in the entire 18th century were recitatives and arias, and that was mainly it, no? And then, if you remember, Gluck reformed this kind of static approach to opera production, and introduced new forms of arioso type arias that didn't necessarily adhere to the capo aria form, use more accompagnato recitative to even out the acoustical difference between the secco recitative on the one hand and the aria on the other, and so on and so forth. And then remember, a typical component of the opera buffa is the so-called finale, which you find at the end of every act, which is a longer stretch of music, mostly beginning with one person and then another arrives and another and another and another, until all main characters are on stage, and it's musically typically speeds up towards the end, and of course also gets louder. We call this finale. Okay. Rossini, in his operas, develops all of these thoughts further, and mainly wants to go away from, just like Gluck and Mozart, from that recit aria, recit aria, recit aria, but keeping the vocal display in mind, wants to create bigger musical entities that in which a singer can present themselves with more different types of music, not only with recitative or a strict aria, but something in between, and just make it more interesting overall. And one of the standard formats for him to do that, that replaces the secco recitative aria succession in Italian bel canto opera, is the so-called scena. This is how you spell it, scena. And it means, as you can probably imagine, scene. And that's the very typical format for within bel canto operas. I have a slide here which is shows a table that you also know from the book, and this is what it looks like. The typical scena begins with an orchestral introduction, a recitative, accompagnato recitative, that is. Then follows usually slow section that's called the cantabile. Then things speed up a little bit after the cantabile. This is called tempo di mezzo. Here they call it middle section, but it really means that the tempo is not slow and not fast, but somewhere in the middle. And then in the end follows the so-called cabaletta, in which things speed up, get louder, and lead to a big brouhaha and end of the scene. Okay. Spoiler alert, this would be a question for the exam as well. Bring the component parts of a typical bel canto scena in the right order. Remember, orchestral introduction, recitative, cantabile, tempo di mezzo, and cabaletta. Now, what does that look like musically speaking? We're looking at a scene from Rossini's probably most famous opera, The Barber of Seville, or in Italian, Il Barbiere di Siviglia, which is an opera buffa, in the bel canto tradition, with a super chaotic plot. If you're interested, and it's super funny actually, look it up on Google, what it's really about. It contains lots of secret messages, drunken brawls, mistaken identity, and so on and so forth. Now we're looking at one of the main characters' entrance aria. Her name is Rosina. And the scene is probably one of the most famous opera scenes in all of opera history. It's called Una voce poco fa. What the text means, I'll show you in a moment. I put it here in the slides. By the way, all of these slides, of course, you have in your slide set on Blackboard. So just as we talked about earlier, this scene begins with an orchestral introduction. I put the names of the sections here in red, which is really the only moment where the orchestra actually gets to do a little bit. Then immediately follows the recit. A voice a while back echoes here in my heart. Already my heart has been pierced, and Lindoro inflicted the wound. So Rosina has a crush on Lindoro, as you can imagine. Yes, Lindoro shall be mine. I swear it, I will win. My guardian will refuse me. I shall sharpen all my wits. In the end he will be calm, that I shall rest content. Yes, Lindoro shall be mine, I swear it, and so on and so forth. All of that is still recitative. And you will see there's lots, like here, of opportunities for the singer to just do her thing in terms of a vocal display. I think we could just listen to this up to here, okay? Let's start with the orchestral introduction. Recitative.
Una voce poco fa qui nel cor mi risuonò, il mio cor ferito è già, e l'indor fu che il piagò, si la vincerò, si rindoro mio sarà, lo giurai. Ah, sì, la vincerò.
This was a good example for one of those moments where the singer is improvising additional material. When you look at the score, the vocal part is actually quite difficult already. But in the bel canto style, singers are expected and required to improvise more virtuosic material in terms of little embellishments and cadenzas, and that was a great example for that. Alrighty, let's listen on.
Il tutto ricuserò, io d'ingegno aguzzerò, alla finza chiederò, e contenta io resterò. Si l'indoro mio sarà, lo giuro.
we're here, by the way. Yeah, so I think this makes very clear what I've been trying to say about the bel canto style. Also, you see lots of high notes that are improvised and added on to this texture. And at the same time, the orchestra really just providing the acoustical background to what's going on. Now, as we continue in the scene, follows the cantabile, a quick intro here, and then a more vocal and somber section of the scene. Here we go. Okay, so in this particular scene, the cantabile is really rather short and leads in with this really funny ma into the tempo di mezzo, where you'll see things are about to speed up a little bit, and the orchestra is now playing while the singer does her crazy vocal things. Okay, let's listen on. By the way, yes, you're looking at the right page of this, but she really improvises much more than actually the score says. Pretty cool, isn't it? You can imagine that people just went crazy with this kind of stuff. Not only is it almost like easy listening, the melodies are great. You can remember them. You can go home and whistle them. You can play them in your salon. It's entertaining. It's light. It's fresh. And the vocal display of the bel canto singers is just so breathtaking and so cool. So you can imagine that sometimes singers had to repeat a scene like this several times before the audience would let the opera proceed. Apart from Rossini, there's two other names that I would like to mention. That's on the one hand Vincenzo Bellini, and the other name is Gaetano Donizetti. And together with how do you spell that? Gioacchino Rossini. Those three guys here are the main bel canto composers. We're, for our intents and purposes here, are only looking at Rossini, but Bellini and Donizetti composed in a very similar style, if however not necessarily only always in opera buffa style, but also with more serious plots. Well, that's it for today. I know this lecture is a little shorter than others, but this is all I need you to know about bel canto opera. Next opera day, opera day 3 that is, will be a little shorter because we need a little bit of time to look at two examples from music dramas by Richard Wagner. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this class. As always, please post on the forum on Blackboard if you have any questions, or email me or get in touch otherwise. I hope you have a great few days until I see you again through YouTube. Take care and bye now.